Hello, I'm Miss Lori, and this week we're talking about the letter Q. The sound of the letter Q sounds like this. And if you're in my writing class, you know that Q is always followed by U. Q is the first letter in the word quail. A quail is a funny type of bird. Q in quail. The first letter is a capital Q, and the lowercase letter is Q. It almost looks like a backwards P. We have to be careful when we're writing the directions of our letters. This is a silly drawing of a quail, and this quail's name is Quentin. Does your name start with Q? I know someone named Quinn, and I know a boy named Quincy. Q is not a common letter, but it still has a special sound. Our poem today says, Quentin the quail, 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 wanted to float, float, float. He chose a sail, 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 just for his boat, boat, boat. Q says, Qua. If you are practicing your writing skills, you can use the handout for the letter Q. We start at the top on our clock and go around and connect, and then we cross it at the bottom, capital Q. Now, when I do my lowercase q, I usually don't put a tail on it. I just go straight down, but you can add a tail if you'd like. Q says qua. We have another handout with a quail on it. If you want to trace some Qs, make sure you start at the top and go around clockwise, counterclockwise actually. Another thing I started to think about was the queen of the castle. Queen starts with the letter Q as well. And queens and kings are often talked about when you're talking about castles. Over in Europe, there are many kings or queens that are in rule. Not in my country. I live in the United States, and we have a president. But if you were in a country over in Europe, you might have a queen as your ruler. And one of the songs I've sung to my young children is Sing a Song of Sixpence. It talks about kings and queens. If you know it, you can sing along with me. Sing a song of sixpence, a pocket full of rye, 24 blackbirds baked in a pie. When the pie was open, the birds began to sing. Now wasn't that a dainty dish to set before the king? The king was in his counting house, counting all his money. The queen was in the parlor, eating bread and honey. The maid was in the garden, hanging up the clothes, when along came a blackbird and snipped off her nose. Isn't that a funny song? You may have seen my favorite blanket. This is a quilt, and my mother-in-law made it for one of my sons. A quilt isn't fuzzy like a blanket, but it is a blanket covering made out of small scraps of fabric. Maybe those fabric scraps came from some articles of clothing, like a shirt or a bag or some leftover fabric from another sewing project. And ladies often take those pieces of fabric and sew them together to make a beautiful quilt that you can snuggle with on your bed. Q is a harder letter to think of things to start with. But if you think of the quail and our friend Quentin, if you think of the queen of the castle, and if you think of a quilt, those are just some of the words. When I meet you in my Preschool Pals class, I'd love to hear other things you've thought of that begin with the letter Q. See you later.